Hey everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to the channel, and I want to start off by saying I'm hoping you're having a fantastic day. It's another scorcher here, but it's actually not as bad as it has been, but there's been storms rolling in and out, so I got a little bit of sunlight right now, and I'm out here in the garage, and I'm going to pick back up on the Datsun. So the last time you saw me, I was kind of finishing up the front brakes, and since then I basically have completed all the brakes. I've got the brake pads in. I went back and retorqued all the nuts, and so other than the final adjustments, the brakes underneath the car are ready to go. But I figured while I'm this far, I might as well go ahead and do the brake master cylinder. So that's what we're going to cover today. That hopefully shouldn't take too long. If everything goes well and easy, never does, but if it happens to today, then really there's nothing stopping me from being able to get this on the ground and maybe take it out for a drive and see, if the brakes are working. But I also want to go ahead and do some basic maintenance, oil change. I want to go ahead and drain the coolant out of the car, do spark plugs, things like that. So if the storms start rolling in, I'll probably do those things first. That way I just know it's all kind of taken care of before I get on the road and something fails. It has been sitting here on the lift for way too long. I'm definitely suspect that there's probably some things that are going to happen once I try to start this up. Anyway, this is the first time the car has not been fully lifted up in the air, and I just got it down low enough. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the hood, and I'll show you what we're working with today. So hopefully there aren't any wasp nests in here, but let's see what we've got to work with. So there's a few spider webs, but nothing to be too concerned about. So the brake master cylinder in this car is right here, and it actually looks like the reservoirs are pretty low. I haven't messed with this since I've owned the car. I just went ahead and purchased a new master cylinder just because I'm here, might as well do it. Probably want to go ahead and get some PB blaster on some of the bolts. There's basically going to be two bolts that hold it to the booster, and then we got to get the two lines off the bottom of each of the reservoir. Well, it's on the bottom of the brake master cylinder, but it's just below each of the reservoirs. So this reservoir is for the front brakes, and this is for the rear brakes. It's got a separate system for each pair of brakes. Yeah, this one doesn't look so bad, but like I said, it's cheap enough to just go ahead and buy a new one, and then I can keep this one and rebuild it if I ever need to. The booster's a little bit dirty, and I'm really not going to mess with that too much right now. Hopefully it's going to be fine. So I think the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is get some PB blaster on the bolts, let that soak in for a second, and then I might want to go ahead and take off the shield just to make life a little bit easier getting in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get some PB blaster and some tools, and I'll check in once I've got this shield off. So to remove the brake master itself, there's just two 12 mil bolts, one right on the top and one right on the bottom. That heat shield had four 10 mil bolts. Well, it should have four, mine only had three, but you can see just when you look straight down, there's two kind of near the brake master cylinder, and then there's two a little bit lower. With that shield out, it's much easier to access the 10 mil nuts to secure the brake lines. And it looks like this has had a brake fluid leak in the past because the paint's all ate up underneath this. One thing I've noticed is that this car has brake fluid level sensors, and the one that I got as a replacement does not. So I'll either need to study if these caps will fit the new one, or if I need to reuse these, or maybe it just doesn't even matter. But they are actually pretty low on fluid. There's really none in them. But if you did have fluid in yours, I'd go ahead and use a siphon and rags and try to get as much of the fluid out as possible from each of the reservoirs, because it's still going to make a mess. So on the bottom, you've got the two nuts. So you want to use a flare wrench nut to do that. It just protects from causing damage there. And then you're only really going to be able to have access to use a wrench on the two nuts that are holding the brake master on. So like I said, I've soaked everything with PB blaster, so I'm hoping that makes it much easier to come loose. And from my vantage point, it's really hard to see the two nuts that are on the bottom of each of these. So I think I'm just going to have to feel my way under there and see how easily these break loose. So after messing with it for a few minutes, I'm afraid that I just can't get the nuts from the lines off the bottom of the master cylinder. I can't even see them, and trying to use a little, 4 or 5 inch long wrench, you can't get enough swing in there. And if anything, I'm just going to strip them out. But the lines that come out of the bottom of the master cylinder, and it'll be easier to show you once this is out of the car, there's about 10 to 12 inches of hard line. I think it's a distribution block, and it's mounted here on the firewall, and those are easy to access, and they don't look like they're super corroded. So I'll probably just go ahead and loosen the master cylinder and loosen those 2 bolts. It's going to make a bigger mess, so I've got to pan down to catch as much fluid as I can. And as soon as I disconnect them, I've got some rubber plugs that I'll try to stick in the holes. They're not rubber, they're silicone. Instead of sitting here trying to bust my knuckles trying to get these 2 that I can't even see, it'll be just quicker for me to get the other 2 loosened. So I got the 2 12mm bolts to take off here, and then I'll break those loose off the firewall. And then as soon as these are loose, I'll loosen those and try to stop as much of the fluid loss as I can, which we're flushing the whole system, but still be good to keep as much air out as possible. So let me grab a wrench, I'll get the 12 mils out, and then we'll get this whole assembly out. So my idea kind of worked and kind of didn't work. The 2 I could see over here, actually, one of them only comes to the master cylinder, but I did get the one for the front, underneath the bottom of the front reservoir, was easy enough to finally get loose. Now, once it had some play in order to see what I was doing, so I think I can pull this out. So I went ahead and disconnected there are just some bullet connectors for the 2 wires coming into the caps. So let's see, I've got to feed that, make sure to not get caught up on the line on the bottom, and out she comes. So yeah, they weren't too bad. Oh, that's disgusting. But definitely was easier to do it this way than trying to get them all out. So I think the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is wow, there's a lot of sludge in the booster, so I'm gonna see if I can clean that out and set this aside for a second. So let me get this cleaned up, and then I'll show you the new master cylinder. We'll go ahead and get these lines swapped over, and yeah, then we can hopefully start bleeding the system. I got the extra brake line off, and I've just been looking over this, and it was very, very dirty to begin with, but it is just full of crap otherwise. So yeah, I'm glad I went ahead and just thought about at least replacing this. Rebuilding it would have been an option as well. It's not too bad, but definitely would have needed to go ahead and replace a bunch of parts, and by the time you did that, a new one is not all that much more expensive. So I still have to look at the float switches for the brake level sensors, but right now that's kind of whatever. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll be okay. So unfortunately, it looks like there's probably an issue that I need to go ahead and maybe either get a rebuild kit for the brake booster or just a whole new brake booster. So I'll show you that real quick. So after cleaning this up really as good as I could, it looked like somebody had actually tried to caulk this all together. There was tons of some sort of sealant or caulk all over that, and it was pretty messy, but I got it cleaned up. But looking down in there, it's very like rusty inside there, which I don't know if that necessarily be an issue, but I'm going to go ahead and assume, and from what I can see, the seal that's back in there is basically, I mean, it's not doing anything. The early Datsuns up through 72 had a 7-inch booster, and I think this is an 8.5, and the rebuild kit for this, for the whole thing, versus the cost of a new booster is very small, like $30 or $40 difference. And for the headache of rebuilding this, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and order a new one. So I think for today, I'm gonna leave this where it's at, just make sure all my mess is cleaned up and maybe move on to something else. But you know, I've just been sitting here admiring the work of the previous owners, and I'm convinced that pretty much everything on this car is being held together with electrical tape at this point in time. And you know, I found like wood screws holding on this cowl, and it's actually, when I drove it, it didn't penetrate any of these lines, but it's a wood screw, and there's just stuff everywhere. I don't even know what's original at this point, and there's vacuum lines that don't look like they've all been rerouted somehow at some point in time, and of course coils and things like that look really rough. So I'm really surprised that this thing even runs. But anyway, I definitely got some issues with this radiator, so that's gonna have to get fixed at some point in time. And I went ahead and pulled the battery, got it on a tender. I thought I'd already done that, but I went ahead and got that on a tender to get charged. But like I said, I've got these radiator hoses don't look too terrible. They actually probably been replaced sometime after this car was made. I've got thermostat and things like that I need to start working on. So I think for today, I'm going to just go ahead and order that booster, and it'll probably just come in a few days, so it won't take too long. But I gotta go ahead and get this mess cleaned up. Some of this work on this, all those washers stacked up, I doubt that's from the factory. Eventually this engine's coming out anyway, and transmission's coming out. I'd like to at least keep this in the car for enough of a time to kind of appreciate what it is before we go ahead and do the engine swap. I think I'll check in here in a second. Once I've got this mess cleaned up a little bit more, I'll go ahead and order the brake booster. Now, I was just sitting here looking over the car, because since I've had the car, I've basically have not touched it, and that was kind of on purpose. I didn't want to fiddle too much with it and, kind of experience it all new like you guys are going to see it. So, I'm obviously been in the car and some things, but, there was a carpeted dash cover I just lifted up to see, is my original dash actually cracked? And it's been glued down, but kind of right through the center up here, there is one crack, but the rest of it's in good shape. But that dash is fine. Maybe an opportunity to get that off, clean the adhesive off, fix that one crack, or just deal with it for now and have a pretty good looking dash. And of course, the seats from the previous owner and the steering wheel cover, all that's still original. And I've just been kind of poking around to kind of see, what other issues we're going to run into, so that I can keep my eye on parts. So obviously weather stripping, I've got a whole kit to do that, because pretty much all the weather stripping on this car is shot. But the carpet's still a little bit wet, and I'm not sure what that's from. My feeling is that it had rained and a bunch of water had gotten in through the doors and just sat here and kept the carpet wet. So it's drying up, but it's definitely got some moisture. I pulled these seat covers back just enough to kind of see what I've got, and they look like they're in good condition. I think they're tied down, because I can't just pull them off. But the seat, at least on the passenger side, looks really good. And the more I've kind of inspected the car, I've found little things here and there. So there's certainly been some leaks around these rear quarter windows. The installation of this trim, or this body line, it's just screwed in and doesn't look like it has a seal. So, of course, I'll be taking that off and smoothing that out. But, I did notice in some places it's kind of popped up. But, I found some Bondo here and there. And the previous owners had told me that the car had been repainted. So I knew that at some point in time, like right there, you could kind of see, some point in time, there had been some work done on this car. And there is, obviously probably some hidden things that we're just not going to see until they rear their ugly heads. But under the hatch, it's pretty clean. These shocks are pretty strong. It's got a cool speaker system. It's like old home speakers that they put in the car. Obviously the carpets are pretty grody. Plastics all look pretty good. There's a few cracks here and there, but it looks like everything's here. There's something weird going on with this light. I think they didn't get it installed all, rotated all the way under before they bolted it in. So it's kind of just hanging here a little bit loose. And then under the carpet, it's got all the space saver tire, a tool bag, jack, can of air, and I found all these lug nuts, and actually found another 280Z badge. I don't know if this car is necessarily missing one, but that one's in good shape. So if I do have one, then I'll be able to replace that. So talking about that trim just kind of screwed in there, but I've got the antenna in the car, and it's got like door lock knobs broken off, and some of this trim is quite loose. Like, I don't know if it's broken, but it just kind of flops around. This side looks pretty clean, and I've been kind of finding oddball bits and pieces laying around inside the floor and under the car. there's an area that there's clearly been some work done at some point in time. So I think we'll end up uncovering some stuff as we get through this, but all in all, it's in pretty good shape. That, you know, I do find lots of locations where things are missing fasteners, so that's kind of annoying. I'll have to go through and try to find that. And I am quite concerned at the condition of the floor pan on the driver's side. And I haven't, again, I can't just pull these seat covers off, but the seat looks good. And, you know, I've tried to pull back the carpet as much as I could. It's kind of glued down around the edges. So when we get into that, I'll just tear the whole carpet out. For what I'd paid, and of course that was almost 3 years ago, so the price of these things has only gone up. So I think I got a good deal. It's pretty much a complete car. Definitely has not seen any maintenance, at least in a long time. And it's straight. I mean, there's little dings here and there, but you know, I can go around the car. In very few places do I think there's actually very much Bondo. It's probably some of the typical places, and like looks like there's some right there. So of course, you know, plans to get the bumper off, you know, redo the suspension and get all, you know, new lower control arms, upper control arms, all that, or struts and all that stuff. You know, the engine bay, I sat here and looked at it even longer, and the longer I look at it, the worse it kind of gets in terms of just hodgepodge of stuff that, you know, I'm finding just take a couple minutes and do it right and save yourself the headache down the road, but it'll be okay. Battery tray is a little rusty, but it's not horrible, and I don't see any rust holes all the way through. And so yeah, this thing has got a long way to go, but I think, you know, once we get some of this odds and ends stuff and drive it, appreciate it, and then get right into the engine swap. That'll be the time that we go ahead and start addressing some of these big issues with, you know, rust or whatever we got. I need to get back online and order off. Well, you know, like that wiper's barely holding on, so I'm gonna have to get some of that too. But before too long, we'll be ready to do the engine swap, and when we do that, there'll be lots of downtime to get lots of stuff fixed. But you know, for now, I just want to get this running because I want to be able to get my lift available so we can do some work on the RX-7. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the video here. I got a little bit derailed on today's project because of the brake booster issue, but up on the screen, you can kind of see where things stand, at least with the project budget. I did go ahead and get the master cylinder off of Amazon. Actually found it the cheapest there at the time. This was probably a year ago, but this was the cheapest place I could find it. And the brake booster, got it from Z-Car Depot. Again, at the time, that was the cheapest place I could find it. And I think I mentioned in the video earlier, but a rebuild kit for the booster must have been somewhere around $150 or $160 at the time. So, you know, it was just a small cost to go ahead and get a brake booster. It's an aftermarket part, but in the end, it ends up working out okay. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here, but I appreciate you guys. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below, but I will see you in the next one.